When the person you love the most becomes your life partner, it feels like life is finally complete. That's exactly how I felt. After marrying the woman I loved, I truly believed I was the luckiest man in the world. I was among those rare few who didn't have to struggle to win their love. But little did I know that even after having everything, I'd be left empty handed. What happened to me was beyond belief. I was betrayed in love so cruelly that I was never able to lift my head again. The girl I loved more than myself, the one I married and brought home with full honor, shattered my self respect completely. I've always been a deep sleeper. Every day I worked tirelessly under the scorching sun, personally overseeing my farmland. I had no shortage of servants or workers, but this habit of hands on labor was something I had inherited from my father. From planting the seeds to harvesting the crops, I was always present, shoulder to shoulder with my workers. One such night, after an exhausting day, I fell asleep early. Naturally, I woke up around dawn. When I opened my eyes, I noticed Rano, my wife, wasn't in the room. I assumed she had gone for a morning walk in the garden. The village weather had been pleasant lately, with fresh, cool air drifting in at dawn. Since I had gone to bed early, my sleep was complete, so I decided to step out and join Rano for a little stroll. Lately, I had been so busy with work that I hadn't spent any meaningful time with her. With that thought in mind, I left the room. But just as I did, I heard her voice coming from the adjacent room. I couldn't understand why Rana was in her maid's room so early in the morning. Just as I reached out to knock on the door, it slowly creaked open on its own. And the moment I saw what was inside, the ground slipped from beneath my feet. Rano's eyes met mine, and she froze in shock. I stood there stunned, unable to move, praying it was just a terrible misunderstanding. But within seconds, reality struck me with full force. I hadn't been mistaken. I had been deceived, truly, deeply betrayed. I was the village landlord, a Wadara, and I lacked nothing in terms of wealth or status. I was known for always getting what I set my sights on. Everyone in the village knew. If I wanted something, it became mine. That's just how it was. So, when I fell in love with a girl, I was ready to go to any length to make her mine. But, as fate would have it, I didn't have to struggle much. One day, while visiting a nearby village to look over some land matters, I saw her for the first time. She wore a light-colored dress, glowing like a blooming flower in the fields, laughing and playing with the village children. By the time I made my way closer, she had moved to the well and was drawing water with the other girls. Her smile seemed to light up the entire field. I had never seen such a beautiful face in my life. Curious, I turned to my personal assistant and asked, "Who is she?" But even he didn't recognize her. I walked toward her myself. As I approached, I asked her to give me some water. A silent command I was used to giving. Everyone in the village knew me, and the moment the other girls saw me, they greeted me respectfully and hurried off. But she stood her ground, looking right at me. From her expression, I could tell she had no idea who I was. When I motioned toward the clay pot for water, she calmly poured some into a brass tumbler and handed it to me, unaware that in that simple act, she had quenched more than just my thirst. Water was just an excuse. The truth was, I wanted to look at her. She was so breathtakingly beautiful that I simply couldn't take my eyes off her. Just then, a servant came running up from behind and called out to her, "BBG, everyone at the Haveli is looking for you. Your Baba Sahib will be furious if he finds out you're wandering around the village like this." At his words, I was stunned. This wasn't just an ordinary village girl. She was the daughter of the landlord of that village. I had unknowingly stumbled upon the daughter of a powerful man just like myself. After offering me the water, she walked away with her servant. My gaze followed her until she disappeared in the distance. For the first time, life itself seemed beautiful to me. And learning that she was the daughter of a Wadera filled me with satisfaction. Now I knew she was within my reach. She was no ordinary girl, and that made everything easier. Within hours, I had gathered every detail about her. Her name was Rano, and she was the only daughter of the landlord. Without wasting a moment, I asked my mother to send a formal marriage proposal to her home. Along with it, I also sent word to resolve the land disputes that had long existed between our families. I knew her father would agree to the marriage at once if those land issues were taken off the table. And I was right. However, before agreeing to the wedding, Rano made one unusual request. She wished to meet me in person. I gladly agreed. When we met, she looked me in the eyes and calmly placed a condition before me. It left me momentarily surprised. She said she would only marry me if I allowed her to bring her personal maid with her after marriage. I told her that we already had plenty of servants in the Haveli, but Rano was firm. She explained that this particular maid was a modest, veiled woman who had been with her for years and she wanted her to live close by, in the room adjacent to ours, so she could call her whenever needed. Why would I object? I was deeply in love with Rano and I was willing to agree to anything just to marry her. I gave my immediate approval and Rano smiled. Our wedding took place with great celebration and fanfare. Everyone in both villages attended the grand affair. As part of her ruksati, Rano brought her maid along. She was given a room right next to ours. I told Rano that all the servants usually stayed in the back quarters of the Haveli, but she immediately grew upset. She insisted that her maid not be treated like the others. She wanted her to remain right next to her so she could be summoned at any hour if needed. I didn't press the issue. After all, I had won the woman I loved. What more could I ask for? I knew this arrangement went against my mother's principles. We were landlords, people of status, and in our culture, servants were never given equal standing. But for Rano's sake, I somehow convinced my mother to accept this unusual condition, and Rano's maid was allowed to live in the room next to ours. On our wedding night, Rano looked like a celestial being. She was so radiant and stunning in her bridal dress that I couldn't take my eyes off her. People in the village said we looked like the moon and the sun. A perfect pair. I too was considered handsome, but Rano was the embodiment of beauty. Just watching her made a tide of emotion rise in my heart. I could no longer hold myself back. I showered my love upon her, and before long, she surrendered to the moment. We became one that night, body and soul. It was one of the most beautiful nights of my life. There was something intoxicating in Rano's embrace, and I lost myself completely in her. I was so overjoyed to have her that I announced a celebration in the entire village. If I had the power, I wouldn't have let her feet even touch the ground. I had sweets distributed to every household and treated her like a queen. She was truly the light of my life. Her personal maid was always by her side, like a shadow. It seemed they shared a close bond, which is probably why Rano was happiest in her company. Most afternoons, the two of them would go out to the fields and gardens for long walks, returning only in the evening. I never imposed any restrictions on Rano. I only wanted her to be happy. I often traveled to the city for selling our crops, and in my absence, Rano would spend all her time with her maid. My mother, however, was never fully comfortable with the arrangement. She would often ask me, "When we already have so many servants in this house, why did your wife have to bring one from her parents' home?" She especially disapproved of the maid's strict veil and reclusive behavior. Why does she hide her face not just from men but from women too? What is she hiding? At times, I too found it odd. But when I asked Rano, she assured me, her face is badly burned. That's why she veils herself. She doesn't want anyone to see it. Her explanation gave me some peace of mind, and I chose not to question it any further. Rano told me that she had always seen her maid's face, which is why she never felt afraid of it. But the truth was, the maid wasn't even there to do any actual work. She was just someone for Rano to talk to. I had already hired separate household staff to handle all the chores. Ever since the wedding, I'd been dealing with constant setbacks on my farmland. Crops were repeatedly being damaged, and despite using all kinds of treatments and pesticides, the destruction only worsened. I was deeply troubled by it. One day, my mother said something that struck a nerve. "Your wife must have brought bad luck with her. Ever since she set foot in this house, everything has been falling apart." Her words made me furious. I couldn't bear to hear a single word against Rano. To me, she was everything. Far more important than crops, property, or even family reputation. Rano and my mother barely spoke, and the distance between them had grown. Rano's attitude toward me, too, had always been cold and distant. I had assumed it was just her personality, reserved, maybe shy, but what I discovered later stripped away every illusion I had about her love. That morning, when I opened the door to her maid's room, I stood frozen. The maid was not a woman, it was a young man. And Rano was sitting with him on the bed, holding his hands, deeply engrossed in conversation. As soon as they saw me standing in the doorway, the color drained from their faces. The young man hastily pulled a veil over his face, but it was too late. I had seen everything. I stormed into the room and yanked the veil off his head. Rano's face turned ghostly pale. "What is this?" I demanded. My voice trembled not with confusion, but with betrayal. Never in my wildest fears had I imagined that the woman I loved so deeply, the one I'd brought home with pride, could deceive me like this. I had trusted her completely. Rano quietly said, "At least listen to the truth once. After that, whatever you decide, I'll accept it." But I couldn't. I didn't want to hear a single word. I had already seen the truth with my own eyes. Suddenly, everything started making sense. Her obsession with the maid, her refusal to eat without her, her coldness toward me. It was all because that so-called maid wasn't a servant. He was her secret, her lover, her deception. I told Rano to leave my house immediately, right then and there, because there was no longer any place for her in my life. I didn't want to create a scandal, so I warned her to disappear before daylight. But she fell at my feet, crying uncontrollably. My patience had finally snapped. When I moved forward in rage to attack the young man, Rano threw herself in between us like a shield and begged me with trembling hands not to lay a finger on him. She even swore on my name. I asked her, "What was lacking in my love that made you form a relationship with someone else? Tell me, what did I do wrong?" It was clear now that she had known this man for a long time. He had even arrived at our wedding with her. My thoughts spiraled. The same woman whose tears I once couldn't bear. Today, her cries didn't affect me at all. I was a man raised in a conservative village, and for me, dignity meant everything. I had given Rano a life of honor and respect, and yet I believed she had ruined it all with a servant. Fuming, I said, "I'm fully conscious of what I'm doing," but before I could finish, Rano gently placed her hand on my lips and whispered through her tears, "Please, just listen to the truth once, then do whatever you want." I gave her 5 minutes. Speak. What she told me broke me in ways I never imagined. The truth was nothing like I had expected. Sometimes what we see is not reality. It's just a deception created by our own assumptions. She began. "When I was 5 years old," she said, "my mother gave birth again. I was so happy. I thought I was finally getting a baby sister or brother, but fate had other plans." Tears streamed down her face as she continued. "The child born that day wasn't a boy or a girl in the way society understands. My father couldn't accept it. He was a powerful village leader, obsessed with reputation. He beat my mother mercilessly and ordered one of his workers to get rid of the baby, to kill it." I stared at her, stunned. "But my mother," Rano said, "fell at that man's feet. He didn't want to do it. By God's mercy, the worker was kind. He didn't kill the child. Instead, he took the baby far away and gave it to his own sister, who couldn't have children. She raised the baby in secret. I could barely breathe. Years later," she said softly, "my sibling was returned to us. But as a girl, disguised, veiled, silenced, only my mother and I knew who she really was. From that day on, I kept her by my side, not just as a maid, but as my own blood, as my younger brother, hidden from a cruel world." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. "She never worked," Rano added. "She wasn't a servant. I hired other helpers for chores. She was only with me for protection, for love. Because if the world found out what she really was, it would destroy her." I stared at Rano. The woman I thought had betrayed me had actually carried a secret on her shoulders for years. A secret that wasn't shameful, but unbearably heavy. She hadn't been disloyal. She had been brave. And we, had judged her too soon. After that, since Rano's mother had no other children, everyone simply assumed that Rano was an only child. Her father, a proud and distant man, never paid much attention to household matters, so he had no real knowledge about the so-called maid who quietly lived under their roof. But when I sent a marriage proposal for Rano, her heart began to panic. What would happen to her brother once she left? For years, she had hidden him from the world, kept him close, and protected him like a secret treasure. Now the thought of leaving him behind haunted her. Rano's mother had grown ill from worry. She too knew that if something happened to her, her son, the child society would never accept, would be left alone and vulnerable. So, together, Rano and her mother devised a plan. The boy would leave with Rano. He would go wherever she went, even to her new home. That's why, when Rano met with me before the wedding, she placed that one condition: she must bring her personal maid with her. She was certain I would never refuse. And she was right. The moment I agreed, Rano felt safe. She married me and moved into my house, bringing her maid along, but she couldn't bear the thought of making her brother live among the servants. So she gave him the room right next to ours. It was her way of shielding him from everyone. From men, from women, from the eyes that might expose the truth. She ensured that no one ever got too close. If her father ever found out his son was still alive, he would not stop until the boy was truly dead. He would punish the servant who disobeyed his orders years ago, and he would never forgive Rano's mother. Their lives would be destroyed. Rano sobbed at my feet, her hands trembling, her voice cracking as she confessed everything. She told me she had only hidden the truth out of fear that I might throw her brother out of the house the moment I found out who he truly was. She couldn't take that risk. She had already lived too long guarding him from a world that didn't want him. She had built her life around keeping him safe, and the person I had mistaken for her secret lover, the one who had shattered my trust and poisoned my heart, was none other than her own brother, a child born with a difference this cruel world could never understand. A soul God had sent with a challenge, and humanity had cast aside with contempt. I knelt down and helped Rano to her feet. Then I held her hand in mine and looked into her tear-soaked eyes. "You should have told me the truth from the very beginning," I said softly. "If only you had trusted me, we could have avoided all this pain." She wept silently, and I knew her heart was lighter now. I promised her that her brother would never be sent away, not from my house and not from her life. He had already suffered enough, and so had she. Because the pain Rano had endured all these years was just as deep as the anguish I had felt the moment I saw her inside that locked room with a young man. And yet, now that I understood the truth, I found myself thanking God 1,000 times. Grateful that I hadn't rushed into a devastating mistake. I turned to Rano's brother, who had lived for so long behind a veil of fear and secrecy, and said, "You no longer need to live hidden behind the identity of a maid. You have every right to live with dignity. Every human being has some flaw or imperfection. And if God placed a difference within you, it's not your fault. It never was." Hearing these words, a light returned to Rano's face. The light of relief, of peace, of knowing she had not chosen the wrong man to trust. I took Rano's hand in mine, held it gently, and promised her, "No matter what, I will always stand by you and by your brother, through every storm, through every challenge." What I had once mistaken for betrayal was not a betrayal at all. It was the love of a sister, a fierce, selfless love that had carried her brother through an impossible life. Her brother, in truth, was incredibly blessed to have someone like Rano, a sister who protected him with her silence, who sheltered him when the world would have crushed him. I brought him into my work, side by side with me in the fields, and within just one season, my barren lands began to flourish again. Crops I had never seen before rose tall and healthy. The same fields that had brought me nothing but loss now overflowed with harvests rich in color and life. He worked with passion, perhaps because for the first time, someone had accepted him without conditions. The wealth I earned from that single harvest not only covered all my previous losses, but surpassed them. My fields were golden once more. And Rano, her face now always held a smile. Free from fear, free from hiding, free from the constant weight of shame and secrets. Inspired by her brother's journey, I made a decision that would change more than just our lives. I resolved to open an institution, a safe place where people like Rano's brother could come to learn, to grow, and to build their lives with pride. A place where society wouldn't mock them or hide them away, but celebrate them. because no one deserves to live in the shadows, not when their hearts shine so brightly.